Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this ceasing event on democracy at a crossroads, the Czech parliamentary elections and their implications. Welcome to everybody in the room and everybody who's joining us online. For those of you who are online, we seem to be having a little bit of trouble with the camera that shows the room, but you should be able to see the slides and Zora, which is what matters most. I'd like to just briefly introduce our panelists. But first, I'd like to welcome Jana Nahodilova from the British, Czech, and Slovak Association, which is a co-sponsor of this evening's event, just to say a couple words of welcome as well.
Well, welcome on behalf of BCSA. I really don't want to say too much because I think we've got a lot to say about the topic, both the panelists and all us in our audience. But I'm really pleased that we can do this collaboration with SSEES as the BCSA because the topics that we cover are not just about culture. It's very much about politics because the politics is really culture. So we're very pleased that we can do this again with SSEES, and I hope to look forward to future. And I'm really looking forward to this debate by these amazing panelists and led by Jakub.
Thank you very much, Jana. As Jana said, my name is Jakub. I'm a historian here at SSEES, but I'm just moderator here tonight. I'm not going to be saying much of substance. So let's go to those who are. First of all, Dr. Jessie Barton Hronešová, lecturer in political sociology here at SSEES. She's worked a lot on narratives, especially of victimhood and their political implications in Central and Southeastern Europe. Here, sitting next to me, is Dr. Seán Hanley, Associate Professor in Comparative Central and East European Politics. He's worked a lot on Czech politics in particular, but party politics in the region more generally, on the decline of the left and other matters. Then, sitting between Jessie and Seán, is Dr. Michael Škvrňák, researcher from the Institute of Sociology of the Czech Academy of Sciences, who's done a lot of work on political elites, political careers, and democracy. In addition to his post at the Institute of Sociology, he also works at the PAQ research organization in Prague. And online, joining us from Prague, is Dr. Zora Hesová, assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Charles University in Prague. She's worked on a lot of issues such as culture wars, on which she co-edited an important volume, religious movements, and secularism. So I'd like to first ask the panelists to respond in about 5 minutes or so each on their general impressions of the recent Czech parliamentary elections, what they found most interesting, surprising, or significant in the election. And I'd like to hand the mic over to Seán first.
Actually, I'm going to cheat and avoid that question by, I will answer it a bit, but I'll just give it also for the benefit of... Okay, lovely. So for the benefit of those who weren't observing Czech politics for the last few months or few years, I'll just talk through who won and how they won and what the main surprises were. So hopefully we've got just talk through the basic kind of results. So to no one's great surprise, the election was won by the ANO movement, the Yes movement of billionaire. He's usually described as billionaire populist Andrej Babiš, with just under 35% of the vote, which was in line with the upper end of what opinion polls projected. It's the second highest vote for any individual party in the independent Czech Republic, and I believe the highest number of votes cast for any single party. So he's the clear winner. Czech politics used to be really a very clear matter of kind of left and right. You had social democrats, communists, Christian democrats, sort of conservatives who model themselves on the British conservatives. But now it's gone quite weird looking. And we have the Yes Party. The losers of the election were the Together bloc of the current Prime Minister, Petr Fiala, Together Spolu, three-party coalition dominated by ODS, the Civic Democratic Party, of which Fiala is the leader, with a smaller Christian Democratic Party and an even smaller Liberal Party, top 09. The Christian Democrats, though, although they have quite small support, I think opinion polls say about 3% independently, have done very well out of the Czech Republic's preference voting system. The voting system is proportional based on regional lists, 14 very uneven regions, but voters can cast four, as well as voting for a party, voters can cast four preference votes for individuals to move them up the order, the ranking of the list. And so you have the phenomenon of so-called jumpers, people who've been moved up the list by personal votes. And a lot of Christian Democrats jumped up the list of the Together coalition. So the Christian Democrats have a kind of outsized representation. And it looks like that coalition, which has been around since about 2020, I think, will not last. Then we have STAN, which is the Mayor's Independence. They're a kind of centrist party rooted in mayors, in local government, liberal, pro-European. They have 11%. And that's pretty much in line with opinion polling and expectations. Then we had the Pirates, who one of the only really successful pirate party in the whole of Europe, in the Czech Republic, who have these kind of countercultural, anti-establishment origins, but are really a kind of left-leaning liberal party with strong votes among the urban centres, Prague, Brno, younger people, better educated people. They were in an awful state before, having previously teamed up with the mayors and were in crisis and were in the government in alliance with Together, and left, didn't really fit. But they've recovered, didn't quite do as well as some people thought they might, but they've made a solid kind of return. Then we have the SPD, the Freedom and Direct Democracy grouping. That's the far right, led by the Tomio Okamura, who's a Czech politician of Japanese heritage. This was interestingly, it was a kind of coalition. It was Okamura's party, but also as other more extreme and varied kind of nationalist and right-wing parties. So I think 5 of his 15 deputies are in fact from other parties. And then I guess, and this is the surprise package of the election, the Motorists Party, led by charismatic ex-racing driver Filip Turek. A party, yes, to do with motoring and cars and so on, but a right-wing populist party opposed to environmental politics and with a kind of broader mission. They're part of the same far-right European grouping as Viktor Orban and Babis's party, and they say, you know, the car is a symbol of freedom and the market and so on. So we could discuss, I think, maybe whether how rooted they are in driving and in the motor industry. And then the final party that needs mentioning is Stachilo. It was a kind of communist-led left-wing nationalist alliance, which included the rump of the once mighty Social Democrats, who couldn't decide for a long time if they wanted to be in this alliance with the communists, if they wanted to run independently, if left-wing politics meant having a socially kind of conservative nationalist element, similar to maybe what Robert Fico has done in Slovakia. They eventually did opt to join Stachilo. Enough, it means enough. And this party or bloc also included various other more minor groupings and some really very radical anti-system figures and and parties and little groupings, and they have failed. They were widely predicted to just about cross the 5% threshold, and they have failed to do so. So that is another another surprise. The proportional system, of course, means that no party can get a majority. So Babiš has 80 deputies in the 200-member Chamber of Deputies, the Czech lower house. That's pretty good. I think it's the second best performance since 1993 by any party. But he, of course, needs partners. There has to be a coalition or some kind of arrangement. And it's almost certain that that arrangement will be between Babiš, Okamura, the SPD, and the motorists. But we don't yet know what form that will take. Will it be a coalition? Will it be some form of confidence and supply? Or when it will emerge? The president, Petr Pavel, who is an independent, ex-leading NATO, ex-general, ex-NATO kind of official, has said that he's not going to nominate anyone as prime minister for about a month until the parliament meets. Well, I think it's on the 5th of November. So there's lots of kind of negotiation about what shape the government will take, what ministries these minor parties will have. But of course, we know one thing, and that is that Andrej Babiš will be nominated and Babiš will be back. So there's one continuity in Czech politics, which is that for about the past 10 years, it's been all about Andrej Babiš and who he is and what he wants and what he's going to do, and it still is. Okay, so that's my kind of overview, kind of opener. Okay.
We go on to Michal now.
Okay. I think that the most surprising thing about the results is that they are not that surprising, and they show long-standing divisions in the Czech society. And if you take a longer-term look at the results, it shows that well, the current or the ending government led by Spolu was kind of enabled by the failure of opposition parties to coordinate, and by the fact that a lot of votes kind of were lost due to the fact that the Social Democrats, the Communists, and other right-wing parties such as Přísaha and Trikolora failed to cross the 5% threshold in 2021. And then in this election, we could see that Andrej Babiš was able to mobilize voters, those voters who abstained in 2021 and voted for him before, mostly because they abstained because they were unhappy with his management of COVID. But he also managed to mobilize voters who were kind of regular abstainers this year. And that was kind of the reason why he was so successful in this election. Yeah. And we can see that like support of ANO is driven by the economic disparities in the Czech Republic. The highest increase in turnout were in the regions that are declining or stagnating, such as like the farmers' city, and yeah. So this is something that the right-wing parties need to take into account if they want to win again in the future. And then there are definitely some interesting developments. Well, one thing is that most of the parties run as a pre-electoral coalitions. Together is one SPD run with some minor right-wing parties. Pirates were supported by Greens. Stachelo run as a coalition of Communist parties, Social Democrats, and other like minority parties. And it will be interesting to observe if they will survive these electoral coalitions. I think that mostly in the case of Spolu, their future is kind of on the verge. I think that a lot of people from ODS are unhappy with the coalition. They would prefer to run alone, and they are unhappy because due to the preferential voting, the Christian Democrats gained more seats that they would gain if they were running alone. So that's definitely interesting. And we, besides this, we have also seen that the preferential voting kind of shuffled the I don't know who got to be the MP, like in the case of Pirates, like women almost or like took over the party, because like, I don't know, 15 or 14 MPs out of 18 are women, which kind of angered some of the men. And the party kind of will probably need to figure out if they want to do something about it, or like maybe they will try to, or maybe they should implement some quota so that men also have some chance in future election. Yeah, and like in the case of Stan, the preferential voting also, or like some young women and younger candidates benefited from the preferential voting. So this is definitely interesting, and will be interesting to watch what will happen to the parties if they will reckon with some pushes from the voters.
Thanks so much, and thank you for organizing this discussion, and for our speakers from the Czech Republic to also come online and in person. So I thought I would prepare my 5-minute notes in terms of what are the good news from these elections, because there are some good news, and what are the bad news. And I mean, the worst news has kind of already been explained in terms of, you know, Babiš is back, but that, as has already been said, is not a surprise at all. So I think in terms of the good news, as was already said, there was a high political mobilization. The turnout was one of the highest we've seen, 69%. That's basically just 1% lower than presidential elections that we saw in 2023. People mobilized for a variety of reasons. We could discuss, you know, whether that's good or bad, you know, whether they felt that they, you know, there was some sort of a threat and that's why they had to vote. But they showed up, and they showed up across the board, young people as well. We even saw a very strange and interesting new political party, Generation, you know, basically set up by a teenager at that time, you know, gain 0.5 percentage points, which is interesting on its own. So like, you know, youth voting and the young vote has played a role here as well. I think the other good news, again, going back to the circling, as we would call it, so the preferential kind of votes for individuals, is also good news from my perspective, because we have seen, or we do see now, that the House of Deputies is now a lot more diverse to what it used to be. We now have 12 deputies that are under the age of 30. We have nearly 33% of female deputies, which is the highest number we've ever seen in the House of Deputies. Again, we can discuss, you know, why and what's happened, etc. I think the third good news is that despite predictions, the extremist vote, if you like, or the far right vote, as well as the far left vote, did actually not get as many percentage points as was expected. ANO essentially siphoned off quite a lot of this, a radical vote, which I suspect is good news. Again, we can discuss, why that is happening. And Okamura is definitely, despite, the results and despite the fact that he's now negotiating seats for his party members in the government, is basically a loser of these elections in one way or another as well, because he did not do as well as was expected. So I think that's good news from my perspective. I think the fourth good news is that Babiš, in one way or another, is an opportunist. He cares about money. He cares about his image as well, not necessarily about changing the political system. So a lot of the threats, that the Czech Republic is going to be leaving the European Union or NATO, that's not really what he wants. And he's been signaling as much before as well as after the elections. So I think the good news is that, we cannot see any kind of dramatic changes in terms of that kind of political vision. He does care about his image abroad, and he does not want to be seen as a right-wing extremist on par with Fico or Orban, despite the fact, where his party sits in the European Parliament. I think the next good news is that, and this is questionable whether this is good or bad news, is Babiš will have a very tricky time if he really wants to put together the government that he wants together, which I will discuss as well briefly, making sure that he can manage them. He's going to be babysitting them a lot. We've seen that already. He's been moderating some of the statements that were made, especially by Mr. Okamura. It's going to be really difficult for him to manage the government. So he's going to waste a lot of his time on that. And I think it could really damage his domestic image. And 4 years from now, I do wonder whether this coalition actually might be damaging to him in one way or another. I should have said that the political mobilization, because we're in London, was not only internal, but also abroad, right? These were the first elections where the correspondence vote mattered. We saw an increase of 111 percentage point by the vote abroad. 1/3 of that was because of the posting ballot. And congratulations to London. We did really well with our mobilization, guys. Okay, 2,065 people. We did basically the best in the entire world per city. Okay, and most of these votes went for, as we would expect, Pirates and Stan parties, so the pro-democratic parties. Now, the bad news is the government that Babiš is trying to create with this. As Seán already said, he had essentially two options with this division. He can either create a minority government with tacit support of the extremist parties, if you like, although we can discuss whether motorists actually really are an extremist party. Or he can enter into a coalition. We saw before the elections that none of the other parties wants to enter in a coalition with him. I think it would probably be a political suicide for them. And I don't think many people expected that he would jump this quickly into bed with them. And that's exactly what happened. Elections are over, and he starts signaling that he will create a government with SPD and motorists. And on top of that, there's quite a high probability that Mr. Okamura becomes the third highest kind of constitutional leader in the country as the Speaker of the lower house. Again, that's problematic, not only because of their political visions, but also because both of them are facing criminal charges. And so they're going to be backing each other up to make sure that the police will keep their hands off them. Second bad news is that having obviously SPD in the government potentially is going to be really bad news for minorities and refugees. SPD is the most racist, Romophobic and xenophobic party in the Czech Republic. So there's not going to be any progress on that front, which is sorely needed. In fact, there's going to be a regress in that perspective. Third bad news is because of the motorists being in government, it's also bad news for gender. If toxic masculinity is a term you have not encountered, you will now encounter it in high-level Czech politics. Motorists are a highly problematic party in terms of their cultural positions towards women and gender overall. Filip Turek, so one of the leaders of the party, is in fact facing a series of serious accusations regarding rape, sexual violence, and the likes. And the fact that, some of the discussions we've already seen about the predominance of women in politics that we can expect in the House of Deputies already is really bad signaling in terms of, how gender has always been discussed in the Czech Republic, but now it's probably going to be even worse. The fourth bad news is that in one way or another, Klaus is back. The anti-climate change discourse is back as well. Again, the motorists are very much an anti-climate change party. Not believing in global warming and science, etc. We saw a letter by scientists today being sent to Mr. Babiš, saying, please do not listen to that. Climate change is real. And we know that Klaus is actually kind of like the gray eminence in the background of the motorist party, especially through Mr. Matýnka. Fifth bad news is probably for Ukraine. We know with these parties in government, despite the fact that Babiš probably doesn't care that much about this issue, they have strong views on Ukraine and, you know, how money should be distributed. And the Czech ammunition initiative is definitely in danger. All of that is TBD, so we don't really know. And I think the sixth bad news, which I hope that someone else, Seán or Zora, can probably talk about more, is that the left is officially dead in Czech politics, if it hasn't been for the past decade already. And I think I'll hand over to Zora through that.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. What to add? I'll just qualify maybe the surprise. The overall results were expected, but in the run-up to the elections, actually the story was Babiš will win around 30%, and he will have a difficult time building a government, because all these parties will pass the 5% bar, and they didn't. So the ANO party, the Yes party, actually succeeded tremendously. This was not expected, and his situation is actually much easier with the conservative left, Stačilo, out. So this was actually the one big surprise that is seen as quite important, because out of all the anti-system radical parties, Stačilo was actually the only one that had an ideological program, an illiberal, destructive program of some would speak about regime change. They wanted to change institutions, unlike the motorists and the SPD, who probably will have much more limited political influence on the places in which they will be having influence. So this was a major surprise and a positive one for the stability of the system, and also for the future of the left. Yes, like in Slovakia, or for a time in Poland, we are entering the second parliamentary term without any left. Even Stačilo was not really a left. It's a national conservative party with a plethora of very different, mostly nationalist positions, and their coalition with the Social Democrats, yes, did ring a bell for the existing Social Democratic Party, and there actually is now a much better chance of the Social Democrats to actually restart, but it will take 2 electoral cycles probably. So for the moment, there is no left at all. Most of the left-leaning voters have voted either for ANO, even some former as Social Democrats, as they have openly said, or for the Greens. The Greens are another small surprise. We had a Green Party for around 15 years. In the last 10 years, they were incapable of entering the parliament, always ending at around 1 or 2%. And now they have jumped on the coalition bandwagon. They also joined a party. They joined the Pirate Party, and due to actually low positions on the candidate lists, and due to preferential voting, and also to the mobilization of actually some left or green voters, 2 of their women candidates have actually been elected to the parliament. So this will also change situation. This parliament will be very different from the last one, also because there will be around 12 or 13 parties due to the election building, the coalition building. So the Pirates include the Greens. The SPD coalition includes very small, even more radical parties. Even the motorists have people from different backgrounds. So we will have a parliament that will be in some ways much more polarized. The outgoing parliament was largely conservative, partly liberal, not left at all, but there were a lot of nuances between the various shades of conservatism. The new parliament will consist of several very vocal figures, much more vocal than we were used to, especially among the radical right parties, among the SPD parties, and also the motorists. On the other hand, there will be much more younger people and women. So we can expect something very new. When there were arguments in the parliament in last years, they were not how would I say, they were not very they would not present a lot of ideological positions. So this will change, and it can only bring something. It can mean something positive and negative. The negative part for the Czech political culture and democratic culture is the fact that, yes, as has been said, many of these figures are actually much more radical than they used to be. The SPD is a populist radical right party, but they have only a few topics: migration. Now there will be the anti-gender issue, the anti-climate change positions will be much more represented. And there will be political parties that actually do not have much other program, I'm talking about the motorists, than actually rejecting a lot of liberal issues. So we can expect more culture wars, and we can expect them probably also from Babiš, who will not have a simple task governing. He has a program that includes actually a lot of technocratic but rational programming concerning education and healthcare system, but also a lot of right-wing ideas, and and especially a lot of social spending in a moment of the state budget that is incapable of actually generating a lot of tax income. So we'll probably have we will be witnessing quite a lot of culture wars deflection of real issues. I would probably end here to allow maybe the discussion to move to the government, to the building of government. It has started. Yes, the second issue I would like to raise is the fact that, yes, the comeback of Babiš was expected. There is no panic in Prague, because it is a politician that we know. He has been in government for 8 years before the last term where he was out of government. His record is not comparable to Orbán or Kaczynski. He did not change institutions. He did not put pressure even on institutions concerning his legal issues, but he comes back in a situation in which he still has a major conflict of interests. He's a billionaire. He owns a lot of companies that actually receive public subsidies or European subsidies, which is a conflict of interest. He also used to own media, and he in the past terms he has been forced to actually put his holdings, his companies into next external holding, but the court have actually ruled this out. So it will be much more difficult for him to actually legally deal with the conflict of interest. We don't know how we will do it. He can't sell his holding. He can't really just pretend that his family takes over. So this is a major issue. It will not impede him from taking the government, obviously, because with such a huge popular legitimacy, it would be impossible. But it will cast a certain shadow on his political activity. He also has just been almost sentenced for a court case that has been running for some 10 years now. Now with parliamentary immunity, he will not receive the sentence, but he is actually a criminally prosecuted prime minister, which And he comes back for a second chance, something that Orbán and Kaczynski and PiS did also, with a small hiatus of one or two electoral periods, and his comeback will probably not be, he will not be the same old Babiš that was in the beginning rather a technocratic liberal populist than left-leaning populist, because he ruled in a coalition with the Social Democrats. He will now rule with the extreme right parties, and also he has made a certain U-turn or a certain turn towards the national conservatism in European politics, and he also will probably have a much greater will to power or drive to actually exercise influence and power, just like the strong man from PiS and Fidesz had. Not in an ideological sense. He doesn't really have a program of ideological or institutional reforming of the Czech politics, but in the sense of concentrating power. And we have seen the way he speaks, the way he wants to decide very quickly, and the way he wants to manage his new government. We already see this push towards a concentration of power into his hands. For example, in the sense of building a government, like dividing the spoils between the three parties without speaking about any programmatic issues so far. So this will be my few remarks to open up the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Zora, very much. I want to maybe pick up an issue that you refer to, and also Michael mentioned in his remarks, and this is about the kind of the divides, the cultural divides maybe in Czech society that manifested themselves in this election. And I'm wondering, what do the panelists think here? Are these cultural divides, do these cultural divides essentially map onto economic divides, or are they sort of functioning independently of economics? I wonder if anybody would like to. Seán, would you like to start?
Okay. I'd like, because I will say that one of the great puzzles for me of Czech politics is the relationship precisely between these economic questions, because the election campaign was all about cost of living, and yet we know there are culture wars. Indeed, Zora and colleagues have produced an excellent book called Central European Culture Wars. Recommend it to students. Free download. So I'm going to turn to Michael, and I hope that he can kind of explain this relationship, because obviously I think you've got a lot of research and data. Slides.
No, it's fine. Well, I think maybe Zora has a different opinion, but in my view, like the economic divides are the most important, and the culture divides kind of are influenced by the economic situation. So, like, for example, I think that like the SPD positions on migration is affected by the fact that their voters are threatened by the migration, or like they are in low skill jobs. And when I looked at the correlation between the difference in votes of SPD and the number of Ukrainian refugees in, well, different areas, it shows that where there are more Ukrainian refugees, the SPD lost less votes, because like SPD overall lost votes in comparison to previous elections. So these kind of make sense that the SPD are against migration because their voters are threatened by the migration. And the same probably applies to the moderates, who like obviously have some weird positions on climate change, but like the strongholds of the motorists are located close to the car industry factories, like in Mladá Boleslav and Kvasiny. So yeah, I think that the economic divide is the most important, but maybe someone has different opinion.
Well, should we go to Zora now, maybe? Because
yes, if I may, this research for PQ was really interesting. I also believe that the political divide has mostly an economic or social economic rationale in terms of people's chances, work chances, living condition, infrastructure, and so on. But on the other hand, the political framing, I mean, the political framing of this problem does not really appear in the way many parties actually run politics. The opposition has systematically, ANO and the others have systematically spoken about the costs of living, inflation, whereas the liberal side, let's say, has actually only framed their political positions in terms of culture and geopolitics. And this is a discrepancy that has been commented upon a lot. That you have this, and also in terms of defense of democracy. So we now have this. From one side, we have a liberal camp that mostly emphasizes cultural, geopolitical, and democratic values, and the other camp that actually speaks about the bread and butter issues. Coached, but they are always somehow also linked to an opposition to the liberal elites, and they're also linked to all these other cultural issues. And the question will be what part of these, which dimension will be defining politics in the 4 years, whether the bread and butter issues or regional development, the peripheries, and also the destiny of car industry, which has always, it's a major issue in the Czech Republic, but the only way we always usually frame it is that we reject the EU plans for a green, the climate transformation and Green Deal, instead of actually devising some plans to modernize a lot of these industries. So this is the problem, is that the politics usually plays out on this cultural and symbolic level, whereas the actual issues are, and it comes out from data, are very often social and economic, but the right-wing and liberal side it seems unable to actually address them, and we will see if the populist side, the populist part will. And concerning the divide between the outgoing coalition and the incoming, it has been constructed mostly in terms of democratic, cultural, or elitist. So this cultural political construction is actually, for my perspective, deepening the polarization, and it comes from both sides of the political game.
Thank you very much. Does Jessie or Seán want to weigh in on this?
No, I think this is really crucial, and I think despite, like, if you look at the crude numbers, income inequality doesn't look that bad from an EU perspective. But if you look at things like spatial inequality, you really see the domination of Prague and kind of the differences in standards of living. And I think, to be fair, I think it's very hard for a governing coalition to I'm not defending their campaign, which from my perspective was atrocious, but I think it was very hard for them to actually run on any economic issues when they were seen as the cause of the inflation, which again wasn't fair, right? They couldn't predict Ukraine, COVID, etc. was still there. But I think that was potentially also one of the reasons. But I agree that the Pirates, to be fair, did have something in their campaign regarding housing and affordable housing and things like that. But it wasn't the predominant topic of the campaign coming from the liberal/conservative centrist parties. As Zora said, the campaign was very much dominated by kind of like geopolitical threats, and it was very odd to feel like you're back in the 1990s where you're deciding whether you're going to East or West, because that's in a way how the whole campaign was framed. And I think that can be mobilizing for a certain number of voters. And I think those are the voters that voted in the way that they did, but that was the ceiling, so to speak, of it. They couldn't quite, it didn't resonate with the rest, who felt like, well, whom else am I going to vote for? I'm not a racist. I can't vote for Okamura. You know, I'm not a misogynist. I'm not going to vote for Motres. So the only option you've got left is essentially Ano, unless you want your vote to be wasted, because after all, Ano does speak to these kind of economic grievances, at least through discourse rather than through action. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll get to a question and answer with the audience in about 15 minutes. Is that what you were thinking, Seán, around 7? But that leaves us time to deal with a couple other substantive issues, maybe with the panelists. I mean, one is the question about the title of this event, which is called what? Democracy at a Crossroads. And I'm wondering if the panelists think that Czech democracy is at a crossroads, and what actually that might mean. I mean, it's become a kind of truism in the coverage of Trump's reelection to say that, well, it seems now that Trump's first term wasn't an aberration, that actually we are living in the age of Trump. Are we living in the age of Babiš? Are we on the? Does it seem like we're on the edge of something else?
I thought of the title of this event, and I think the answer is possibly no. And I think, again, you know, who is the? I mean, Babiš is presented by the media as the Czech Trump, and has even styled himself in this way, and said, "I am a Trumpian," and you have the red Silné Česko baseball cap, and he's other times not. And obviously you can kind of see the parallels. And I think Babiš has a very strong appetite for centralizing power. I think if you listen to him carefully, he said, "Oh, well, Trump can just decide everything. I wish I could do that. I wish we had a majoritarian electoral system." And you know, what does he like in Orban? He likes that Orban has centralized power, and he's given up the idea of constitutional and political reform. But that was a theme in 2017. So I think he has realistically kind of shelved that as an idea, because it's incredibly hard to change the Czech constitution. There's the Senate, and Ano has never, which works in a similar way to the US Senate. So third is re-elected every 2 years. And Ano has never performed very well in the Senate, and has nothing like the ability to change the Czech constitution. Unlike in, say, Slovakia, where we don't have a Senate, and it's pretty easy, relatively speaking, to do that. And they have just changed the constitution to define gender. There are only 2 genders, and so on and so forth. I think it's more a matter of, again, I would see, and I kind of look back to Babiš's earlier career. I mean, this is a question: who is Babiš? What does he really believe? He's a shapeshifter. But I would look back to his business career, where it was a matter of gradually kind of expanding and absorbing and taking things over, and doing deals with people which seemed to be kind of an equal partnership but weren't. I mean, as the communists found, you enter into, as a minority party, you enter into a political agreement with Andrej Babiš at your peril, because you will come out as the loser. So I think there will be an evolution rather than revolution. And I think the question probably we need to think about is what comes after Babiš. You know, Babiš is 71. He will be 75 at the time of the next election. Ano, I mean, so many political scientists sort of predicted, oh, well, he'll have to change Ano into a normal party. It'll have to go right. It will have to go left. And it hasn't. It's always been his party. So what happens to Ano and the territory it covers and the politician it includes once Babiš somehow is no is no longer around. So I mean, I think we can imagine that Czech democracy will get worse in all kinds of ways. But it isn't the kind of the big confrontation between populists and liberals that the media, pro-Russians and pro-Western, that the media wanted to present. And you can see how this geopolitical polarizing rhetoric from the outgoing government completely failed, and it not completely failed, but it wasn't effective because it had nothing to deliver apart from democracy being on the ballot. Babiš just was not kind of threatening enough, and they focused on the communists and on Okamura, and they all lost votes. So I think that framing, both from political scientists and from the center right in Czech politics, and we've got to ask, what is the center right for? It used to be about transformation, post-communist transformation. Then it was about saving democracy. Now, where is it going to go? We don't know. So I think it will be, deterioration, evolution, metamorphosis, but not a sharp kind of turning of the way, I would say. Okay, sorry.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this question? Zora?
Yes, I would agree. On the other hand, I would expect more of a gradual undermining of certain institutional strengths that the Czech Republic has in comparison, for example, to Slovakia. Nobody actually expects any kind of frontal assault on some democratic institutions, but there has been some issues that have been already promised or threatened from the Babiš side, and it's the public media. It's a huge issue on the radical right. The issue that the media would I don't know, not reflect the position of the radical right opposition. So it will probably be it's quite probable that there will be some change into the law governing the public media, which is an easy thing to do because Babiš has the majority and most of the other small parties, and ANO has actually signaled that that's what they want to do. His openness to actually nominate, I don't know if this is the real long-term goal of Babiš, but he now works with the idea that he will nominate Filip Turek to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a person who has actually been formally charged of rape, but in a case that has happened 15 years ago, so it doesn't threaten him directly, and who has been linked to Nazi symbols, and maybe more importantly, he considers naming another motorist, Matzinka, to the Ministry of Environment, and this person, Matzinka, is actually one of the most outspoken rejectors of the idea of man-made climate change. So this shows that there are certain issues, the issues that define today's politics, climate change, gender issues, foreign policy, that will be secondary to him. He'll probably be open to sacrificing, marginalizing these basically important issues for his for the sake of concentrating power and leading a government he can control. And I guess if this happens, if it's not sure yet, but if this happens, we can expect first the undermining of political culture, these outspoken norms in public administration, in the parliament, that happened in Slovakia very quickly, will probably not happen that quickly in the Czech Republic, because the push will not be ideological, but rather opportunistic, practical. And secondly, he's also, we have to remind ourselves, he's the third now, I think, richest man in the Czech Republic, and he will probably use his style in power to strengthen his economic position. And this is an issue that has actually been thematized more and more in the past years. The effect of oligarchy. The Czech Republic is a country where the economic competition is actually very affected by major players setting rules in concrete sectors of economic activity, and this will probably strengthen under Babiš, because he's one of the players, and some other people in energy industry and so on will probably know how to deal with Babiš. And this has implications for media. It has implications for the funding of political parties. Stačilo, and also all these small projects are often supported by a rich, as we say in Czech, oligarch, but mostly just a rich entrepreneur. So this is the slippery slope, where norms, institutions, and certain important, not crucial maybe, but important elements of the democratic order will weaken. What I expect is actually that the center right will maybe finally awake to the need of really defending democracy in terms of institutions and norms, and also in terms of social cohesion, which is something that was the liability of the past right-wing governments, and that maybe the opposition to Babiš's dealings will maybe invigorate this maybe central, liberal, and left parts of the political of the party system.
Just pick up on that, because I think one kind of point, I mean, I'll just pick up on what Zora has said, and I'll link to what Michal might say something on, which is that the Czech Republic is kind of stereotypically a very equal, egalitarian society. And if you look at some kind of indices like income distribution, you see it's kind of very equal. But in a lot of ways, it isn't. So it wasn't equal in terms of wealth distribution. We had these billionaires, like with concentrations of wealth, these billionaires like Babiš, which you find in other very income equal societies like Sweden as well, lots of billionaires in Sweden. And I think PAQ has done interesting work showing that perceptions of poverty and the risk of poverty in the Czech Republic is kind of underestimated or mismeasured. Plus, as well, I think that there's a kind of regional gap opening up. You know, the Czech Republic is a country of regions, of provincial towns. It's not really dominated by Prague in the same way that some societies are dominated by their capital cities. And regional inequality is opening up. So it's interesting how the Czech Republic, which has always tended to be seen as this relatively cohesive and equal society, in fact, on closer examination, isn't. I don't know if you can you add something there, because I think you probably know about it a whole lot more than I do.
Yeah, it's true. Like, well, basically, the thing about measuring income inequality and poverty is like the problem is that the main measure used to measure poverty is this at-risk of poverty indicator, which is defined as the share of population which is under 60% of national median, which the Czech Republic usually scores as the country with the least poverty in the European Union. But that's just a result of the fact that 60% of median is really low threshold. So yeah, but I will I want to add to the questions about the crossroads. I read some comments by other political scientists, and they kind of assume that the next government will not be that efficient because of some internal clashes between ANO and SPD and motorists. But I think that having government that one part of it is radical right parties is a big deal. So we shouldn't we should keep that in mind. And the other thing is that like from a person who works for think tank or something like that, is that the Czech Republic really needs some reforms, and with such a government, I don't see that there will be reforms that are needed. And instead of doing something, they will just pick fights with the EU over ETS2, and which is like a huge victory for Pavel Tykec and other coal barons, because he is obviously benefiting from the current dependence on coal. Yeah.
I just wanted to add a few things which I should have mentioned. I think part of the explanation also why Babiš was so successful is because, as I was saying about these campaigns of fear, I think the fear was moderated in Babiš's case a little bit because he's the devil we already know. He already was a prime minister. And actually, like, I have in Prague, I've heard from a lot of people that were very anti-Babiš that in these elections, they're considering voting for him so that they give him a stronger mandate, so to speak, so that he would not feel like he needs to create a government with the extremists, right? So you even saw people kind of being to this level tactical and strategic, not really fearing Babiš, because saying, well, he's still not such an evil as Mr. Okamura would be. And I think this potentially backfired, which from my perspective was slightly predictable. But I think the fear that I have right now is, and that was already mentioned, is if you have a party like SPD or motorists for that matter, in the government, we've seen that in a lot of other cases, they push the ideology of the whole government to the right. So it will become more ideological than what we saw in the first government. I think we can expect that. Issues that we didn't think that Babiš really cares about, suddenly he will start caring about. He never really cared about foreign policy. Suddenly he cares about foreign policy. So the media, I think, is going to be crucial. And I think in a lot of political science analyses, you know, the Czech Republic is kind of like a media island, if you like, in the regions that we study because of the public broadcasters that are, you can criticize them, but they're fairly good. And all of the research, you know, that Václav Štětka and other people have done basically shows us that that is actually a pillar of democratic resilience because of the media that the Czech Republic has. And if that goes, that's going to be very problematic. I think what a lot of people wanted as well, this, you know, this defense of democracy, which is becoming like a perennial, I don't know, slogan, if you like, especially of the civic opposition. We've already heard about some of the protests, which again mobilized just before the elections. There's this Shield of Democracy organization, et cetera, but they're defending democracy, which is kind of empty. They don't really, you know, it goes with the slogans pro-West, it goes with the slogans rule of law and the likes, but they don't really talk about delivery. And Babiš talks about delivery. He talks about delivering whatever you want to call it, social democracy or social policies. And I think that's also part of the equation why he was so successful. Again, the good news, you know, through these fears that I have, and I really do fear for the media, this time around, we don't have Mr. Zeman kicking around or half dead, I suppose. But, you know, being a damaging factor, if you like. And there is still Senate. So Babiš, no matter what happens, he does not have the overarching constitutional majority that he would need to change laws, to even organize referenda and the likes. He does not have that majority. And the president, you know, if anything that can be expected of him, he will follow the rules. And actually, he said many times he's not going to appoint Mr. Babiš unless he resolves his conflict of interest. And actually, no one really knows how Babiš wants to resolve his conflict of interests. There is no solution that even lawyers can think of how he can actually resolve this unless he wants to sell Agrofert, which does not seem possible in such a short period of time.